Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is when you're watching. We're so glad you are here. I'm the Reverend Sheryl Butler, and this is Journey Road Ministries, where we strive to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Today is Sunday, November 21st, the 34th Sunday of Ordinary Time. It's also Christ the King Sunday. Now, Christ the King Sunday is a relatively recent addition to the Western liturgical calendar, which was instituted in 1925 by Pope Pius XI in response to the growing secularism and nationalism. A reminder that Christ has dominion over all, as in Matthew 28:18. All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me. I don't think most Christians are aware of this feast, but it was moved to the last Sunday in Ordinary Time in 1970, which means that next week we begin celebrating Advent in preparation for the arrival of the Christ child. The gospel reading today is from John chapter 18, verses 34 to 37. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" And Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." May God bless the reading and the hearing of the word. Well, I find it interesting that Christ the King Sunday celebrates Christ's dominion over the world when he declares to Pilate that his kingdom is not of this world. So some Christians feel that preachers shouldn't preach anything political, and others point out that Jesus was crucified not for being a nice guy, for his political involvement. But what do we know? Well, the Jews felt that Jesus was guilty of blasphemy, which according to Jewish law, he could be condemned to death. Unfortunately for the Jews living under Roman law, they could not legally execute anyone. They needed the Romans to do it for them. The Romans, however, did not care about the religious disputes of the Jews. So Pilate kept trying to send Jesus back to the Jews to deal with him. But the Jews persisted to make their case as why Pilate should have Jesus executed. Saying that Jesus claimed to be a king became a political problem for Pilate, which left him no choice but to condemn him. So Jesus was not understood 2,000 years ago, and he's still misunderstood today. And this helps explain why there are more than 39,000 Christian denominations. Now back to the question of preaching on politics. A case could be made for both sides, but I personally believe that preaching should be relevant to current events. What does the gospel have to tell us about living in today? What is the good news for us in 2021? It's much more than just an intellectual or philosophical endeavor. Kyle Rittenhouse, the young man who killed 2 Black Lives Matter protesters and wounded a third, was found not guilty on all charges. Now, the verdict has set off angry protests across the country, and most people were not surprised. The scene of a white man shooting persons and there being no accountability for it. As people of faith, how should we respond to this seeming injustice? An injustice that keeps on happening because of laws not applied equally and some laws that actually target people of color. It often seems like there will never be justice. Injustice seems like the norm. Where is God? Where is the good news? One of the minor prophets, Habakkuk, wondered the same thing. In chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, Habakkuk asked God, "How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife, and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted." Of course, Habakkuk is not the only prophet asking these questions. In fact, much of the scriptures are about asking these questions of God and attempting to answer. God's reply to these questions in scripture is usually written in beautiful poetry. Habakkuk is a great example, and I invite you to pick up a Bible this week and read the book of Habakkuk to see God's answer to his questions. It's a short book, only 3 chapters. I think God's responses to all these questions can really be summed up by a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. "The long arc of history bends towards justice." It is a long arc, and we are told to be patient, and God will bring justice. But are we to sit on our laurels waiting for God to do something? The good news, as found in Jesus, Jesus does not just tell us what to do for justice, but shows us. Jesus said his kingdom is not of this world, but his life was engaged in the world. We are not to allow the world to corrupt us, but we are to transform the world. So we see Jesus getting angry when he encounters injustice, when others are being harmed. His compassion with people calls out the hypocrisies of leaders, feeds the hungry, and heals the sick. Now, Paul elaborates on this in Romans chapter 12, verses 9 through 21. He says, "Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who curse you, who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay any evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord." On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you'll heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Overcome evil with good. There is no doubt that Kyle killed 2 people. So the question before the jurors was not whether Kyle was responsible for the death of the men, but whether he violated the law. And as people of color especially know too well, the law is not always just or moral. But in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, the story is not over. There will most likely be civil suits that he will face. The young man will have to live the rest of his life knowing that he took these lives. But our anger should not be towards Kyle or the jurors or even the judge, but the system that allows injustice. In truth, the jurors probably did not have much choice but to acquit based on the way the hold your ground law is written. We must march to make known an injustice, but we must also work to reverse unjust laws and educate people about laws and policy that unequally yoke people. As we do this work, we need to remember we are called to love our neighbor, and even more difficult, love our enemies. And I confess, I personally have difficulty loving those whom I do not respect, and especially those I see harming others. As I shared in my last sermon, love is perhaps the most difficult commandment, impossible to do without God's enabling grace. The good news is that we are not alone in this work. As I've spoken of before, ours is a collaborative relationship with God. God will not do it without us, and we cannot do it without God. We must first become aware of what God requires by studying scriptures and then invite God's help. And God provides the grace that allows us to be God's love in the world. As we celebrate this Thanksgiving week, let's give thanks not only for the worldly possessions we may have, but let us focus our gratitude on the gifts of God's kingdom: love, patience, kindness, faith, mercy, truth, true justice, and humility. May God bless you and keep you this week and always. And next week we'll have Dr. William Painter, who will lead us into the Advent season. And if you have any comments or questions on our sermons, please leave some feedback and comments or questions on our Facebook page. See you in a few weeks as we will be well into Advent.